Alright, hey guys, AKRX here again. Welcome to my show and to my channel. And hello, Jeffrey.
Oh,
Alright, so we are not going to beat the dead horse around too much. We're just going to get into it. So, uh, Jeffrey, I think that as of late, it seems that the Paleo community has been going somewhat crazy. And it's kind of been pretty tense in terms of how this there's been explosive arguments about whether or not politics should be part of it, some fights over at the forums and Facebook groups. So what are just to kind of address it briefly, but what are your thoughts about this whole thing?
I think everyone has is thinking first with anger, and that's where a lot of this is coming from. And when I say everyone, like I mean just people generally. I mean, obviously there there are plenty of people who aren't letting the anger get to them, but it's hard when everyone is just so immersed with these strong emotions. Not for those emotions to not kind of step on each other's toes and set each other off. And yeah, it's spilling over into forums where it's really off topic, um, because the passions and importance of the topics at hand.
So there's something very interesting that you have pointed out of how, and let's be real. I mean, although I think I made it very clear already, and I am about to edit and release during the next few days. Depends how long it takes me, because it's a huge file, and release the podcast that I've done in addressing the subject. And sometimes it got a little heated, sometimes it was calm, and all in all, it worked out. That's the main point. But the main point is that this is going to likely come out before the big podcast anyway. So in case the chronology gets a little messy, so people understand what's going on. And I have been very strong proponent of the idea to not insert politics and social issues, religious issues, personal life issues into paleontology community and hobby, because I believe you actually were the one, so I'll have to credit you for making that argument for the first time when I recall we have discussed this. But by when we just tune in for the paleo and nothing else is attached, would you agree that basically this whole thing, at that point, it's basically a common ground for everyone until we start introducing politics, at which point it becomes a battleground, and that in turn leads to tribalism and camp breaking, and inevitably it happens, and it completely changes the entire atmosphere, and it no longer becomes about the hobby. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I there's actually a scientific study that backs up the idea of paleontology being common ground, and a political common ground at that. It was based on looking at the sales of online books and the demographics of the people who were buying them, and looking specifically into how people were consuming science. Okay, so like there are other elements of common ground out there, but as far as science goes, paleontology was one that interested both liberals and conservatives, both Democrats and Republicans. And that is a precious rarity in political climate of the past 20, 30 years. So if that's the case, then I can hear some people saying, well, doesn't that mean that this is a place where people should be talking politics? And the answer I would say would be definitely no, because paleontology as a science is not political. When we say political, we're not talking just about the partisanship and the ideological divide and how that plays out in different countries. Talking about objectivity. Science needs to be objective, and politics can be very subjective. And when you introduce things or topics that have such hot feelings behind them, conversations tend to be taken over very, very quickly, and suddenly your paleontology forum, days, weeks, even permanently, becomes nothing but an echo chamber. Whatever group managed to insult the other group and cause enough of its members to leave outright. It's not a way to conduct forum. It's not a way to preserve common ground. Rather, what I would propose, and the reason I think we should keep paleontology, be it professionally or in a case like this forum as a hobby, as sort of a discussion, is that we need institutions where people can find that common ground again, reconcile things, and let go of feelings. We need a place where I think the word that you've used has been escape, and I think I agree with that in concept. I might not use the word escape because many times people hear that and they think, oh, well, this means like utterly leaving the issue behind and pretending like it doesn't exist. That's not what anybody is suggesting here. What we are suggesting is that we need a place to make friends regardless of what that person's political stance is. And if we can do that and can begin to have conversations about politics that will actually have an effect, because we'll understand how the other person thinks, how the other person talks, and when we take it into the political arena, and we can start to actually persuade one another and come to some kind of an agreement that is either mutually beneficial or at least something that we can both live with and is a true negotiation. That's how solutions are presented moving forward. One way that this has been put, and this will be kind of my final point for now, but in our last discussion, I saw a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, one particular person say that being apolitical is a political stance. You're saying that the forum needs to be apolitical, and if that's a political stance, then the political stance is we need to come together. Okay? We are not saying you shouldn't be discussing politics, you shouldn't have a political opinion. We're saying it's off topic here. Very good reason.
Yeah. And the other problem I have with this idea, and I noticed that this rhetoric has been thrown around by many people actually, is that we are seeing how saying that apolitical means being political, but apolitical is directly synonymous of not being political. When you add the prefix of a, it basically goes direct opposite. Apolitical, amoral, it's the opposite of being political and the opposite of being moral, respectively. And subsequently, by doing this, it just comes off as a very disingenuous mental gymnastics, not to be directly, not to disrespect the people who have used this argument before. This is only to highlight that this argument does not work. In fact, it's not even an argument. And I think it's important for people who have come across this and who have been guilty of using this to understand why this doesn't work. So along with what you said, it's very important to not just redefine and reshape the already existing established definitions just so they can fit a certain idea because we just like it better that way. And I think that's a very wrong approach. No, I also agree that by keeping this politically neutral, this is for people who have not, I strongly advise to watch John Wick films, and you will understand that there is a place there, like a lobby in a hotel, which is a neutral ground where all contracts or whatever targets are off, where you cannot basically, even if you're worst enemies and even if you have contracts to kill each other, you are not allowed, it's a taboo to basically confront each other in that manner on the premises of that place, because it's a sacred neutral ground. As somebody who loves this hobby and this community for what it is and loves dinosaurs since I was freaking 4 years old, I treat this ground as sacred ground. And to me, inserting these kind of issues which they are completely off topic is basically tainting and contaminating this sacred ground, and I personally feel insulted, and I feel like the space is being invaded with it, because we're not leaving the debates at the table of debates, we're dragging them into literally everything, and I think this is a problem. It's kind of going out of control, and it needs to stop. It really needs to stop. Well, I've said my piece for now. Your turn.
Yeah, well, I agree that something that there needs, it's like a lot of passions running around right now are trying to force people to draw lines. They're about anybody you perceive as sitting on the fence, or is being moderate, or trying to maintain relationships with people who disagree with them. There is a very concerted push to destroy the idea that people can disagree civilly, and no society can survive that. I'm going to put a link to the here.
Yeah, you came out there for a second, like you just stopped. I stopped hearing you.
Okay, so now this headline to this is going to come off as a little bit incendiary, perhaps. Look at where it's coming from. This is a Vox article. Vox is a very liberal online magazine that is based in America. The author of this article is a liberal, and he says that throughout the article. So this is, I know even the image here is pointing fingers, but the meat of this article is describing a rhetorical strategy people are using as a series of cheap shots to shut up the opposition. And if everybody were to act like this, then nobody would be able to coordinate or function in a societal unit. And I have seen plenty of this rhetoric being used throughout society, even on subjects that aren't even political. And kind of smugness that presumes that somebody has the truth, that anybody who disagrees with that somebody simply isn't educated, and they can't be educated, that they are therefore disposable. That is punk, plain and simple.
Yeah, it's. I
And
think I've read this article a while back. You've given it to me
I'm sure
before.
I've shared it with you before.
Definitely, definitely, yeah. It brings
Um,
back some memories.
yeah. So, because the author is a liberal, he's drawing from his own, from the history of his own political affiliation, his own ideology. And I could do that with a number of the ideologies that I subscribe to. There are times where this crops up and it needs to be removed.
There's one thing that I wanted to add, of course, that this is in no way to, obviously, for those who are watching, to initiate any political discussions, whether in the chat or in the comments. This is the article for you guys to make sure that you get an idea of what's going on. It's for your own, basically, education. This is not to just start all of a sudden saying, oh, now we have the green light to just do that. No, it's very important because it's just, I'm stressing the message here that it's a good way to understand not just what is being said, but how they are forwarding it and what's actually being taken out and how it's been presented and forwarded and framed, because there's so much to unpack there. If you really read carefully, there's quite a lot of content that it will just help you to understand it better, basically, and a lot of things are just going to start making sense to you if they aren't already. So,
One
yeah,
last
sorry,
thing,
go
and I
ahead.
can't remember whether I mentioned this in our previous conversation on the topic, which I was, typing in, not actually hearing voice
Yeah, you broke your
or
mic last
anything.
time.
I'm part of my career. I got a master's degree in English, and that involves some teaching. And as a part of my class, did research papers, and this was for English 1010. In English 2010, it was a little bit of a different story, and I allowed a little bit more leeway regarding the choice of topics. But when it comes to being able to earn the skill of research, I told my students that they needed to choose something that was not one of the hot button topics of the day. One of the big ones was gay marriage at that time. Reason that I said, don't, if you're going to present a topic to me based on gay marriage, you better have a plan on how you're going to deal with all the hot button topics, because you're just making life harder on yourself when it comes to research. That's why I forbade it. Is because people get emotional and passionate about this. Those emotions can be turned to good ends. For the most part, it actually obscures the ability of people to bring in the thought part of it. Look at any one of the hot button topics of 2020, and I know there are plenty. Like when it comes to the COVID or the novel coronavirus situation, it's really hard to get solid information on it because everything is being buried in panic or anger over some policy or what have you. That's what we need more than anything. Having common ground that is apolitical, where this panic is not allowed, and being able, especially in a science, practice objectivity with each other and with people with whom we would probably disagree politically, is a vital function of modern society. If we can't learn to do this, then we are setting ourselves up for a world of hurt. And talking about like widespread destruction, this is serious business.
I think it's extremely serious because, let's be real, hobbies in general, and in our case it's paleontology and dinosaurs, there's a reason why many people are passionate about keeping it apolitical, and for the reasons that you have just specified as well. It's to come together, to find common ground, because it reminds us that we actually have a lot more in common at heart, even if we have different political stances, because people vote for different political parties or candidates because they might believe that they represent their best interests, and that is perfectly fine. You always make a choice. It's your own choice. You're an adult. You choose something, you take action, you take responsibility, and you face the consequences. That's just how life works. I don't think I have to really break it down in detail, but the point I'm trying to also remind people is that it's just really important to keep this area here as well politically neutral, just so we can always use this as a last bastion of unity, in a sense, where we don't have to always be on the opposite sides of the fence, and drawing lines in sand. We can always argue about how we depict the dinosaurs. That's a part of the process. We're engaging in debates, not because we don't like each other, but because we're trying to work out the truth and ultimately rule out all the unlikely possibilities based on the best available, quantifiable, empirical, independently verifiable evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well,
yeah, go ahead.
It's time for. Sorry. It's time for me to go. Last word and bit of a for thought. Shakespeare's funniest lines came in one of his scariest tragedies, Macbeth. There is good reason for that. I know that the world is kind of feeling a little bit like Macbeth and its reputation, full of fear, full of doubt, full of anger, full of backstabbing, need forums, places where we can let off a little bit of steam. That it is not optional. So please stop bringing political opinion into paleontology.
You were breaking apart there a little bit at the last, but I think to reiterate, you said stop bringing political opinions into paleontology. Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I second that message, guys, for the same reasons that we have just pointed out. And since you said you gotta go now, and to quote Ian Malcolm, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
That's right.
So
right. It's a different kind of go in my case.
Not quite the same kind of go, but it is what it is.
I'm not going to go and get eaten by a tyrannosaur.
And not sitting on a toilet, no. And you're not a lawyer, so it's not going to be, it doesn't apply to you. So, you're safe.
If another person tries to climb on the sculptures, maybe I'll feed him to a tyrannosaur. But no, I'm just kidding.
Right. But really, though.
That might be something else to talk about in the near
100%.
What people have been doing with Crystal Palace dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, we will. We'll definitely do another mini podcast on that. So, but I want to thank you for taking time at work to chime in a little bit and just reassure people that this hobby is gonna still stay politically neutral, and regardless of which side of the fence you support, that's irrelevant here. Here we have only one side, and that is the love for paleontology and dinosaurs, and that passion and the drive we have to depict them in a cool pieces of artwork. And remember, this is the common ground, not a battleground, so let's try to remember that every time we get carried away. And that is all I have to say for this video. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Thank you very much, those who are watching. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe and join my Discord server. And you're also going to be welcome to join the podcast sessions. They will be posted as long in advance as possible. And we'll just leave it at that. Stay safe and stay beautiful. And I'll talk to you later.